The attack by the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah targeted a military site in central Israel. Israeli media says the strike took place on Monday. A new wave of missiles hit Tel Aviv and across Jerusalem and Haifa. Both parties have been engaged in fighting since Hezbollah struck Israel in retaliation for the killing of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Meanwhile, the Israeli government is expanding its defense budget by $13 billion to finance the Iran war. The special war budget was approved on Tuesday for Operation Roaring Lion. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich called it an investment and not an expense. All right, over now to Rory Challenge, who joins us live from the Jordanian capital, Amman. So, Rory, within the last hour, you'd been talking about the fact that you had heard air sirens where you are. And what more can you tell us about these latest rounds of strikes?
But he it's a fair deal now, and we are not paying tariffs to them, and they are paying tariffs. We did a little flip. A lot of these elite countries, they're elite because we let them make so much money, and I want them to do well, but I don't want them to do well on the backs of the American taxpayer. So I appreciate your question. I think it's reasonable answer.
President Trump, you said that you were disappointed with that, but were you surprised with this decision? What you felt when you...
I was surprised because I thought that what we did was, number one, according to, I read the paragraphs, I read very well, great comprehension. I read everything there is to read, and I said, we can't lose this case. But we can when judges are political, when they want to be politically correct, when they're catering to a group of people in D.C. Maybe, I don't know what it is, because when you read it, there's no other interpretation. We have
thus far in the war, managing to hit a satellite station in Beit Shemesh. And why was this a failure? The Israeli military has called it a failure, saying it was what they hoped was an isolated one. It was a failure because that time there were no interceptions and there were no warnings.
Rory, let's just zoom out for a minute, look at another angle to all of this. In terms of the overall objectives of this war, are there indications that the U.S. and Israel are still on the same page, or are they diverging when it comes to how this war is being prosecuted?
Yeah, I think there are signs that there is a divergence starting to happen. It's not a rupture by
I'm here in the heart of the Lebanese capital, Beirut, where an Israeli strike hit the Ramada Hotel just behind me at the weekend. It's the first time that an Israeli strike has hit in the center of the Lebanese capital since war broke out between the Iran-backed group Hezbollah and Israel around a week ago. Israel says the strike targeted a group of senior Iranian commanders who were meeting secretly inside the hotel. But
the United Arab Emirates says it continues to tackle Iranian drones.
Straight to the airport.
Tehran's still attacking countries in the Gulf with links to the US. It's been 10 days since America and Israel started the war by hitting Iranian targets. And the conflict's having a big impact on trade beyond the Middle East. This is the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important global trade routes to Asia, Europe and beyond. This chart shows how daily shipping activity plummeted in the strait and has come to a virtual standstill. Dubai's main port, called Jebel Ali, is the biggest in the Middle East. Last year it handled the equivalent of 16 million containers. We're talking electronics, cars and chemicals. This crisis is having a big impact on the port here in Dubai.
far, we're knocking them out very quickly. We're ahead of our initial timeline by a lot. I would say that we probably would not have thought after a month we'd be here. In addition to the fact that we've taken out the leadership twice and maybe three times. And we, as you know, we want to be involved. We don't want another president that maybe wouldn't be willing to do what I'm willing to do for the good of the world, for the good of our nation, to be stuck with a situation in 5 years or 10 years from now. So we think they should put a president in, or the head of the country in, that's going to
They said they weren't going to.
Beirut. Thanks so much, Heidi. There have been reports of explosions in Bahrain's capital as Iran continues its strikes across the Gulf region. This comes a day after a 29-year-old woman was killed when a residential tower was hit in Manama. The UAE and
Are now being evacuated with the help of UNIFIL, which is the United Nations monitoring force that's been deployed in the south of Lebanon for a number of decades.
All right, that's Heidi Pett live for us with all the latest from Beirut. Thanks so much, Heidi. There have been reports of explosions in Bahrain's capital as Iran continues its strikes across the Gulf region. This comes a day after a 29-year-old woman was killed when a residential tower was hit in Manama. The UAE and Kuwait say they've also been intercepting missiles and drones. And Saudi Arabia's Civil Defense Authority says a drone fell into a residential area in Zulfi, a city in Riyadh province. All right, Victoria Gatenby joins us now live from Doha. Victoria, let's talk first about Qatar. Qatar's image on the world stage is as a mediator, but now it's coming under direct attack from Iran. So how is Qatar's posture at the moment?
Well, despite daily attacks by Iran, Qatar's posture is one of defense, not offense, because it basically thinks that this is not its war to fight. It has said that it will defend and continue to defend its sovereignty, its territory, and its citizens robustly. It's called on Iran to immediately stop these attacks on its territory and also on its GCC neighbors. But it's calling for de-escalation and dialogue. Now, Qatar and Iran have had diplomatic relations. Qatar has been something of a mediator between the international community and Tehran over the years. They have had diplomatic relations, not least because they share the world's largest gas field, so they've had to have some kind of working diplomatic relationship to navigate that. Having said that, they say that they are maintaining their relations and their close contacts with the US, but they are calling for Iran to de-escalate their attacks, and they're saying that they have to have some kind of negotiated settlement to this conflict.
And Victoria, Iranian attacks, of course, have continued across the Gulf today. What more can you tell us about all that?
Yeah, well, in the last couple of hours, we have had news from Bahrain, the Interior Ministry there, sounding the sirens, telling people to find somewhere safe to stay while some kind of missile or drone attack was taking place. They've urged people to remain calm. The UAE, in a similar position, they said they have been enduring another wave of missile and drone attacks over the course of the past 24 hours. And air defenses in Saudi Arabia have been extremely busy overnight. They have intercepted what they say is 6 ballistic missiles that were targeting the Prince Sultan Air Base. That's where some US military personnel are based. They've also intercepted 5 drones that were headed towards the east of Al-Hajj area. And that's on top of the 2 drones that have been shot down near the Sheba oil fields in the southeast of the country, very close to the border with the UAE. That's an oil facility, a massive oil facility run by Aramco. They produce normally about 1 million barrels of oil a day, and that facility has been targeted consistently over the past few days by Iran, an example of how it is targeting this country and this region's energy facilities.
All right, that's Al Jazeera's Victoria Gatenby live for us from here in Doha. Thanks so much, Victoria. One of the many fallouts of the conflict in the Middle East has been its effect on travel and tourism, both in the Gulf region and Europe. In addition to flight cancellations, volatile oil prices have caused some airlines to hike fares. Dominic Kane is in Berlin with more on its potential damage to the tourism industry.
With tens of thousands of flights to and from the Middle East cancelled since the war began, some research suggests the number of tourists travelling to the region annually could drop by as much as 25% if the conflict drags on. The volatile price of oil has also become a major concern for airlines, with many hiking their fares, posing a threat to the wider tourism industry.
We're no longer in a situation of crisis management from our perspective. I think we're in a situation of permanent polycrisis, whether it's closed airspace this week, whether it's climate crisis, cyber risk, technology risks. There's always something.
At this airport in the German capital, the vast majority of flights are unaffected because mostly it's European destinations that are served from here. There are 2 which aren't being flown to: Doha and Tel Aviv. However, one popular European tourist destination has been directly touched by the war: Cyprus, a country that received more than 4.5 million visitors last year, but whose airports were temporarily closed after a drone attack on a British base on the island. Flights have now resumed, and the government has said Cyprus is open for business.
We have only some cancellation only for March and start of April. The rest of cancellation we didn't have, and really we do already we have a lot of booking and in Get Your Guide and Aviator as well.
That assessment is clearly based on the hope that the situation in the Gulf does not worsen. If it does, the island's tourist appeal could wane, bringing economic damage. Dominic Kane, Al Jazeera, Berlin.
For travel between Asia and Europe, ticket prices have skyrocketed, with Middle Eastern carriers operating limited services. Laura Westbrook reports from Hong Kong.
At Hong Kong International Airport, a sense of relief among passengers arriving back home. For the beginning, yes, it's scary. Man, a few days later, okay.
Thousands of flights have been cancelled since Israel and the United States attacked Iran at the end of last month. The war has caused restrictions on operations at key transfer hubs in the Middle East, affecting passengers like Patrick Leung.
We were on our way to Dubai, and then our flight got turned around mid-flight, landed back in Toronto. So we had 13 hours, flew in a circle, and then back to Toronto. And Air Canada rebooked us to our final destination, which was Bangkok. And now we're here. Yeah.
The conflict in the Middle East is affecting airlines around the world. There are fewer seats available after major Gulf carriers suspended flights, and that's contributing to ticket prices going up between Asia and Europe. But some airlines are resuming limited operations. On Saturday, Emirates said it would be operating a reduced flight schedule. Spiking fuel prices are also putting pressure on carriers and passengers. Rachel Wong was nervous about transferring through Dubai, so she tried to pay for a direct flight to the United Kingdom, but she says a return flight would have cost her more than $5,000.
The price is so high, I don't want to pay so much.
US President Donald Trump has said the Iran war will be over very soon, which could ease air travel chaos, but Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it will decide when the conflict ends. Laura Westbrook, Al Jazeera, Hong Kong.
Australia has confirmed that 2 more members of the Iranian women's football team have received humanitarian visas. 5 other players were earlier granted asylum over concerns for their safety should they return to Iran. The team had traveled to Australia to play in the Asian Cup tournament. Lucia Newman reports.
Australians, many of Iranian descent, tried to prevent a bus carrying members of
when those players were silent at the start of their first match in Australia, that silence was heard as a roar all around the world. And the world wanted to know, and Australians wanted to know, how we would respond.
Striker Zara Didar held back tears when asked about the war in her country.
Obviously, we're all concerned and sad at what has happened to Iran and our families in Iran and our loved ones, but I really hope it will be all right and that we'll have good news ahead.
The fate of the women's football team quickly became an international issue, many fearing for their lives if they went home.
The first time they didn't do the national anthem, so pretty much following the day, there was a threat message was coming through the media from Iran, and it was saying to them if they're going to come back, they're going to be a penalty debt, or could be the families are going to be in a hostage.
Even U.S. President Donald Trump weighed in.
President Trump rang me this morning just before 2 a.m. We had a very positive discussion. He was concerned about the Iranian women in the soccer team and their welfare and their safety if they returned home.
But the majority of team members refused asylum and asked to return home, despite concerns for their future in a country where no one can predict what will happen. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera.
You're watching Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the conflict between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. Here's a reminder of the latest developments. Israel has launched a new wave of airstrikes on the Iranian capital, Tehran. The military says it was targeting armed forces command centers, but the Red Crescent says a residential building was hit and rescue operations are underway. Iran has been striking across Israel throughout Tuesday and early Wednesday. These are the images coming out of northern Israel. A new wave of missiles have been launched towards Tel Aviv. Sirens sounded across the Jerusalem area and the Haifa region in the north. The Israeli army has launched new strikes on Beirut's southern suburbs. Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah. More than 500 people have been killed in Lebanon since strikes began last week. Hundreds of thousands of others have been displaced. Qatar's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs has told Al Jazeera diplomacy must remain at the heart of efforts to prevent a wider regional conflict in the Middle East. Mohammed bin Abdulaziz Al Khulaifi says Doha is maintaining close communication with Washington while urging all parties to return to negotiations. Speaking to Al Jazeera's Adrian Finnegan, he also warned that the security of the Gulf is closely tied to global stability, given the region's central role in energy markets and international trade.
Excellency, Qatar itself has come under drone and missile attack during this conflict. How serious is the security situation in the country right now?
At the outset, I want to say that those attacks need to immediately stop not only on Qatar, but on the whole region. Qatar have mentioned its political position when it comes to this aggression that we have condemned by the strongest terms, the unjustified and outrageous attacks on the state of Qatar, and that directly impact its own sovereignty. And Qatar will do and continue to do every possible and legal measures to defend and practice its exercise of self-defense against this aggression.
Are you confident that the region can avoid a wider war if attacks on energy facilities, airports, civilian infrastructure in the Gulf continue? Could we see a direct military response from the Gulf nations?
Well, I want to say that we are extremely those personnel have
This morning, President Trump touting successes in the Iran war.
We're winning very decisively. We're way ahead of schedule.
As he and his advisors send conflicting messages about how long the war will last. Over the weekend, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told 60 Minutes.
This is only just the beginning.
And on Monday afternoon, the Department of Defense posted, quote, "We have only just begun to fight." But around the same time, the president told CBS News, "I think the war is very complete, pretty much." And soon thereafter said this.
I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion. Short-term. Short-term.
While also adding that the U.S. would not relent.
We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough.
Later in the day, he was asked whether the war was just beginning or complete.
Well, I think you could say it both. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of building a new country. But they have no Navy. They have no Air Force.
Adding that Iran's leadership is largely gone.
We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here, I could call it, or we could go further. And we're going to go further.
President Trump is also facing scrutiny for a strike near an Iranian elementary school in the first hours of the war that killed more than 170 people, mostly children, according to Iranian officials. The Pentagon says it's investigating.
I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But tomahawks are used by others. Whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
But experts say the U.S. is the only military in the war that uses Tomahawk missiles and say it is likely an American Tomahawk missile hit the area near the school. The president yesterday also very conscious of the economic impact of the war, with oil prices climbing after restrictions in the key Strait of Hormuz, though the markets rallied last night.
We're also focused on keeping energy and oil flowing to the world.
Overnight, responding to the president's comments, Iran threatening to stop the flow of oil if attacks continue. The president later posting,
not at one go, gradually.
World where Iran can no longer threaten the United States or our allies with a nuclear bomb. Moving forward, the stated objectives for Operation Epic Fury remain the same. Destroy the terrorist regime's ballistic missiles, raise their Iranian missile industry to the ground, ensure their terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region, and ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. President Trump remains confident these goals will be accomplished in swift fashion.
Okay. All right. So those are the statements that came out of the White House. Getting back to our conversation, I want to get your sense on some of these
Okay, joining us from Washington, D.C. is Jason Campbell. He's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute.
Block the Strait of Hormuz by any means they can, whether it's by mines or with their own navy. I think the fact of the matter is that we have about, half the navy, it seems like at times, in the region. But how many of our ships are able to, demine an area is kind of up for debate. I think we have maybe three of them that could possibly do that. And they're all, tied up in other things right now. It seems like a really dangerous proposition for us to try to escort these ships through that strait, as the Pentagon's leaders have already expressed concern about that idea.
Naveed, speaking as a veteran, tell us how worrying it would be for serving personnel on the ships, and indeed for those who, conducting logistics and trying to strategize what their plans should be if mines are laid down in the strait.
It's really concerning for military family members and the service members that are on those ships to have to, traverse through mine-infested waters is a really scary proposition, something that our Navy, I don't think, has dealt with in a long, long time.
Jason Campbell, what's your take on it? Because it's important for the U.S. to get the strait up and running as soon as possible, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely is. I think with the mining, this is indicative of this escalatory trajectory we see here in the war, I think on both sides. Mining the strait is absolutely one of the more extreme cards up the Iranian sleeve here. And as Naveed said, the U.S. is limited in its ability to demine the strait, given that it just decommissioned its last handful of minesweepers based in the region last fall. So this could really keep this conflict hot for a while and lead to some really big issues as the 68 or so oil tankers stuck in the Persian Gulf will remain stranded there for the foreseeable future.
And Naveed, from your point of view, what's your take on what we've heard from the various elements of the administration, be it the Secretary of Defense, the Press Secretary, and indeed the President himself, on the likely timeline of the war? Are they all on the same page, do you think?
It definitely doesn't seem like they're on the same page. It seems like we have a very accordion-like timeline that we're hearing about. First, it was going to take a week, and then it was going to take 6 months, and now it might take 4 weeks. I think I saw someone online said that the hardest part of a 2-week-long military incursion is the first 20 years, as we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. I served in Iraq in the Army in 2009 and 10. It took us a long time to withdraw our troops from there, and I hate to see that this is exactly the same path that Iran, this conflict with Iran is going down.
Jason, indeed, there's stated US objectives in this war, that they've been fluid, haven't they, to say the least, flowing from eliminating the nuclear threat to the missile threat, to regime change, to unconditional surrender. And now we've been hearing Caroline Leavitt saying that Trump will call an end to it just when he's ready. Is that a coherent strategy from your point of view?
Well, that's a great point. And much more than the timeline, be it days or weeks, is what are the strategic objectives you're trying to achieve? And the senior leadership from President Trump on down has tied itself in knots to touch on a number of things, but not commit to any set of objectives. And we saw it just last night in the president's press conference, referring back to the destruction, or excuse me, the obliteration of the nuclear program back last June under Midnight Hammer, which, again, supposedly was the justification for, or part of the justification for this most recent war. So until those strategic objectives are laid out comprehensively, the timeline is going to remain elastic.
And Jason, also, you have to factor in the Israeli aspect to this and whether or not they're in lockstep with the US.
That's absolutely right. The insinuation here is that the U.S. will just stop the war, potentially declare victory, and pull back its resources. What that doesn't account for is, again, Israeli objectives here and what they want